shepherd boy, a flock of sheep, a cry of wolf that was nothing but a lie. It sounds simple, almost childish, just a bedtime warning against dishonesty. But its true meaning is far older and far darker than we were ever told. Hidden inside this fable is no mere lesson for children, but an ancient trial one that tested trust itself, revealed who could be believed, and decided who would live, and who would be abandoned to ruin. Journey with me into a story that has echoed for more than 2,600 years, and you may find that the boy's voice was never just mischief at all, but the echo of ritual prophecy and fear. Once in the folds of a lonely hillside, there lived a shepherd boy. Day after day, he sat among his flock, listening only to the wind in the grass and the distant howl of wild beasts. Boredom gnawed at him. And so for sport, he raised his voice in terror, wolf, wolf. The villagers heard his cry and came running, pitchforks in hand, hearts pounding only to find no danger at all. The boy laughed at their fear. Again he cried, again they rushed, again they were deceived. But one evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, a shadow truly emerged from the trees. The wolf fangs, glinting eyes burning, fell upon the sheep. The boy screamed louder than ever, but this time the villagers did not come. His flock was torn apart, and the tale says the boy learned too late the cost of his deceit. We know this story as a child's fable, a moral about lies and their consequence. It is counted among the works of Aesop, the Greek storyteller said to have lived 26 centuries ago. His name is the one we remember. But Aesop himself claimed he did not invent these tales. He gathered them, preserved them, shaped them from voices far older. And here something unsettling happens. The trail runs backward out of Greece into older soil where the boy's cry was not simply a prank, but something far stranger. Because when we go searching for the roots of this story,
but with the echoes of
they lead us to rituals of warning, to ancient fears of the wolf, and to trials that decided who was mortal and who was touched by the divine. Scholars tell us that Aesop's tale did not begin with Aesop. It is older, far older, its echoes scattered across the world like the footprints of wolves themselves. And when we follow those echoes, they lead us into landscapes both familiar and strange, where the boy's false cry was not merely a prank, but part of rituals, warnings, and ordeals that shaped entire communities. In the hills of ancient Arcadia in Greece, wolf stories were never just entertainment. Arcadia was haunted by Zeus, Lycaeus, Zeus the wolf. The people believed that during sacred rites, a young boy might be chosen to stand watch over the flocks. His voice the first defense against the wild. But there was danger hidden in the ritual. If he lied, if he cried wolf without cause, then when the real beasts came, the gods themselves would abandon him. The boy's trustworthiness was not just moral. It was divine currency, the thin line between protection and destruction. Already the familiar tale begins to look less like a child's game,
from the ancient
and more
forests,
like a trial by
a shadow
fate.
stirs.
Travel east into
Fenrir,
Syria,
the great
find
wolf,
another echo.
shall break his chains.
Their shepherd children were tested by their elders. They were told to guard the sheep and to call for help only in true danger. But if they sounded the alarm, falsely punishment was swift. They would be left alone in the dark hills, the village ignoring their cries until dawn. It was not cruelty, but pedagogy, a lesson written into the very survival of the community. False cries diluted trust, and in a world where wolves struck without warning, trust was life itself. Further north, the shadow deepens. In the Norse sagas, the coming of wolves was bound to prophecy. Fenrir, the monstrous wolf, was said to bring about Ragnarok, the end of all things. Tales speak of false cries in the night, warnings that came too early.
Why are you laughing at me?
Exhausting courage before the true catastrophe. Warriors who rushed to arms at every alarm soon grew weary, their strength scattered, their vigilance dulled. And when the real threat arrived, their defenses crumbled. Here the boy's cry is more than mischief. It becomes a weapon wielded by fate itself, a reminder that misplaced warnings
Are those cries
can
real?
kill as
Or just the
surely as
wind
silence.
playing tricks on
And
us?
stranger still in
I cannot
India,
tell.
an old
The shadows
Sanskrit
make
collection of
everything
stories known as the Panchatantra carries a parable almost identical to Aesop's. A cowherd boy, restless and mischievous, repeatedly shouts that a tiger is attacking. The villagers rush only to be mocked. At last the tiger comes, and the boy's cries go unheeded. Was this a coincidence, or does it reveal a shared human anxiety, stretched like a thread from the Mediterranean to the Ganges, that the voice of warning may one day lose its power, and with it the safety of the herd? Even across the Celtic fringes of Europe, we find tales of false alarms. In parts of Ireland,
What has he
storytellers
become?
warned of ghost cries in the night, children who called for help where no danger lay. But to ignore those cries was dangerous, for sometimes they were the voices of spirits testing human hearts. The lesson was inverted: ignore too easily, and you might fail a divine trial. Believe too quickly, and you might be fooled. Suspicion and trust hung in balance, just as in the Greek and Syrian versions. Look closely, and you'll see the same pattern returning again and
I do
again.
not know.
The boy's cry is never only about honesty. It is a crucible,
is
a
that?
secret trial set before the community. If they rush too quickly, they are deceived. If they fail to respond, they are destroyed. The wolf is both beast and symbol. The devourer of wealth, the shadow of chaos, the teeth of fate. And the boy is more than a liar. He is a catalyst, the figure whose voice decides whether the village survives the night. This is why the tale endures across so many cultures. Because beneath the laughter at a child's prank lies something far more serious. The knowledge that every society lives or dies by the power of its warnings and the trust it places in those who cry them. So again and again across Arcadia, Syria, the Norse sagas and the Panchatantra, the boy's cry becomes more than a child's prank. It is a crucible of trust, a secret trial hidden in story. But those were tales woven in myth, sharpened by memory. What of the world outside the tale? What of the wolves themselves? Because beyond parable and prophecy, wolves were not symbols at all. They were flesh and fang. They haunted the hills of Greece, the forests of Europe, the deserts of Mesopotamia. And when we follow the trail of bones and tablets, the archaeology tells us just how much was at stake every time a voice cried, "Wolf." Because beyond parable and prophecy, wolves were not symbols at all. They were flesh and fang. They prowled the hills of Greece, the forests of Europe, the deserts of Mesopotamia. And the traces they left behind tell us that every cry of wolf carried the weight of someone. Archaeologists excavating ancient pastures in Greece and Anatolia have uncovered grim evidence. Sheep bones gnawed in clusters, not by one predator, but by packs. In some layers, entire pens appear to have been wiped out in a single night. For the families who lived by wool and milk, this was not just loss of livestock, it was the loss of wealth, dowries offerings, the very foundation of
Prepare for the
survival.
hunt, my warriors!
A wolf attack was an economic catastrophe, as devastating then as a fire or flood. Clay tablets from the Assyrian Empire confirm this dread. Written more than 2,700 years ago, they describe wolves as the devourers of flocks. In royal decrees, entire hunting parties were ordered to exterminate them, not for sport, but for protection.
Mighty Sylvanus.
One tablet
Protect
from
us
Nineveh
from the wolves.
records the tribute of wolf pelts delivered
great
to the king,
bounty for the capture
proof
of
that
these
patrols
beasts.
had slain the beasts that
Let
plagued the
all who
countryside.
hear heed this proclamation.
In these texts,
Oh my
the wolf
goodness.
is not an allegory, but a state-level
shot them!
enemy,
I
an
hope that's the
adversary
last of
governments
them.
organized to destroy. And yet, the wolf endured. In Roman inscriptions, shepherds carved small dedications to Sylvanus, god of the wild, begging him to guard the sheep from wolves. In medieval Europe, the church itself took up the fight, issuing bounties for every wolf killed, their skulls displayed in village squares as warnings. For centuries, the wolf was the terror at the edge of the field, the nightmare that justified watchmen, walls, and ruins. Even the landscape holds their shadow. In northern France, archaeologists uncovered long trenches filled with sharpened stakes, wolf pits designed to trap the predators before they reach the sheepfold. Similar structures appear in Scandinavia, where lines of pits were dug across valleys, forcing wolves into dead ends. These defenses speak to the scale of the threat, entire communities reshaping the earth itself in fear of the hunter's howl, and still the wolf carried weight beyond teeth. In folklore, it became shorthand for ruin in Latin. Lupus was not only an animal, but an omen. To see the wolf meant to be struck silent with fear.
Wolf!
Farmers scattered charms of iron or bone around their flocks, convinced that only ritual could keep the predators at bay.
We must
So when a
hurry!
shepherd boy cried wolf, it was never a neutral word. It was the trigger for alarm, the summoning of every able hand, the mobilization of a community against disaster. In the ancient world, one false alarm could cost precious energy, but one ignored alarm could end a family line. The balance was fragile and the consequences absolute. So the wolf was not merely a creature of story. It was teeth in the dark, a shadow that tore through villages, a predator fierce enough to shape economies and carve scars into the land itself. But look closely, and you'll see something stranger still. For in tale after tale across Greece, Syria, India, and beyond, the cry of wolf begins to outgrow the beast itself. It is no longer only about flocks or danger in the night. It becomes a trial of words, a test of trust, a symbol of how communities rise or fall on the voice of a single child. But look closely, and you'll see a pattern emerging. The story of the shepherd boy was never
It
only
is
about
truly
sheep
a
or
trial
wolves.
of truth.
It was about something far greater, the fragile thread of trust that
You
holds a
have proven
community
to me
together,
your truth.
and how quickly that thread can snap.
Only you would
Across
know this
myths
secret.
and legends, trials of truth appear
Hear
again
my
and again.
warning. The
Arthur
city
must draw the
is
sword
in
from the stone, proving he is the rightful king. Odysseus is tested by Penelope with the secret of their bed, and only the true husband can answer. Cassandra cries the warning of Troy's fall, yet because no one believes her disaster comes. These are not separate stories, they belong to a family of trials in which words reveal more than swords. The boy who cried wolf is part of this family, a test of whether a voice can still command belief. The wolf itself, too, carries layers of meaning. In the ancient world, it was the devourer of wealth, the beast that stalked the very edge of civilization. In Latin, lupus gave rise to sayings of ruin. To see the wolf meant to be struck dumb with terror. In Christian tradition, wolves became the symbol of heresy, the false teachers who scattered flocks. To cry wolf was to summon not only an animal, but the specter of chaos, corruption, and collapse.
Who is that?
And what of the boy?
The children are crying out!
At first glance, he
it's
is simply
Sam.
mischievous, a liar punished by his own deceit. But look again. He stands at the threshold between the village and the wilderness. His voice is the alarm, the gate that either holds or fails. When he lies, he does more than waste time. He poisons the very mechanism of protection. He becomes the figure who corrupts the trial itself, turning vigilance into futility. In this light, the boy is not just a child. He is the community's conscience under strain. The motif grows stranger when we set it beside other myths of false alarms. In Ireland, ghostly cries in the night were said to be tests sent by spirits.
Help us.
Ignore them, and you might prove heartless. Respond to them, and you might be made a fool. In Norse tales, Loki's tricks often involved feigned danger, leading gods astray before true calamity struck. The pattern is the same. The false cry becomes more dangerous than the threat itself because it hollows out the power of warning. And yet, paradoxically, fragility is part of the proof. Just as the princess's sleeplessness marked her otherworldly nature, the community's readiness to respond marked its unity. Each false alarm weakened that unity, but each genuine cry demanded it. The boy's story captures the razor's edge, where belief becomes both salvation and doom. Even the wolf's hunger itself can be read as symbolic. It is not only the beast
Why
in
won't
the hills,
anyone listen
but the
to me?
inevitability of time decay and fate. The flock stands for the wealth of generations, the wolf for all that waits to consume it. The boy's voice is the only barrier. When it fails, the truth is revealed. No wall, no village, no herd can stand without trust. So the fable does not merely say, "Do not lie." That is the surface. Beneath it whispers a darker lesson that once trust is broken, no warning can save you. A society that cannot tell true danger from false is already lost long before the wolf arrives. And stranger still, the pattern does not end with wolves and shepherds. It repeats across the oldest cultures, wearing new masks, but carrying the same hidden trial. In Mesopotamia, Greece, India, and beyond, voices were tested not for honesty alone, but for their power to guard, to guide, to reveal truth itself. The boy's cry then belongs to a lineage of ordeals far larger than any flock of sheep. For when words themselves become a trial, the question is no longer simply whether danger is real. It is whether a mortal voice can ever be trusted to speak the divine. And stranger still, the pattern does not end with wolves and shepherds. It repeats across the oldest cultures, wearing different masks, but carrying the same hidden trial. Everywhere, human beings feared the moment when a voice would call danger, when trust would be tested, and when a community had to decide, believe, or ignore. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, truth itself was bound to ordeals. A person accused of dishonor could be thrown into a river if the waters spared them. The gods had judged them innocent. If they drowned, their guilt was proven. The river was not just water,
Henceforth,
but a divine
your
tribunal.
prophecies will be
In
doubted.
the same way, the boy's cry is an ordeal for the community. His voice is the river. To believe it is to leap. To ignore it is to risk drowning in ruin. Either way, faith itself is being weighed. The Greeks too wrestled with the peril of voices. Cassandra of Troy spoke the truth of doom,
pledge
but
our
cursed
unity.
by Apollo. No
We
one
pledge
believed her.
our loyalty.
Her words, like
Indeed,
the shepherd boys,
we are
lost their
united.
power, not because they lacked truth, but because trust had already been broken. In her failure, Troy burned.
The shepherd
In the
leads
boy's
his flock
failure,
to
the
verdant
flock perished.
pastures. But
Both
beware
tales
the
whisper
wolf
the same
in
lesson.
sheep's
When
clothing.
a community ceases to believe destruction is not far behind. Travel further east, and the motif deepens. In India, sages told stories of Maya illusion that blinds human perception. To cry danger where there is none is to weave Maya to trap others in unreality. In the Mahabharata, warriors and kings are tested not only by battle, but by words, by oaths, by their ability to discern truth from deception. A single false alarm could unravel alliances, just as one untrusted voice could condemn an army. The boy who cried wolf is a smaller echo of this larger philosophy. Society itself depends on piercing illusion. In Christian tradition, the warning cry is transfigured into prophecy. Christ himself warns of false prophets who cry out disaster, who predict the end, but lead flocks astray. The Gospel of Matthew warns, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing,
I
but
will
inwardly are
decide
ravenous
your
wolves.
fate.
Here the symbol folds in upon itself. The wolf is not only the danger outside, but the liar within. To heed the wrong
Let
voice
the
is to be devoured
skies
not by
unleash
fact,
their
but by
fury.
deception. And in the Norse myths, the ordeal appears yet again.
Ancient secrets
Odin himself is a
woven,
god of words of secret
forever
songs.
bound.
His wisdom comes not from strength alone,
Look out!
but from enduring trials, hanging 9 nights upon the world tree, pierced and sleepless until the runes reveal
Wolf!
themselves.
Wolf!
His ordeal is one of endurance and speech.
Wolf!
By contrast, Loki's gift is the false alarm, the trick, the cry that leads gods astray. In this mythic mirror, Odin and Loki embody the two paths, the voice that reveals truth and brings wisdom, and the voice that deceives and leads to ruin. The shepherd boy's cry sits uneasily between them, a mortal echo of divine archetypes. The symbolism grows sharper when we consider the role
Help
of youth.
me!
Again and again, it is the young children, maidens, novices who are tested.
No!
In Mesopotamian rites, girls of royal blood were chosen to serve as priestesses, their purity tested by ordeal. In Greece, initiates of Artemis endured nights of vigil, their cries in ritual dances marking their passage into adulthood. And in our fable,
Please,
it is a boy,
listen to me.
not a man,
I do
whose
not
voice
believe
decides
this.
the fate of the flock.
Please stop.
His immaturity is not an accident, it is the point. The trial asks whether innocence can carry the weight of trust, or whether the untested voice will collapse under its own mischief. Seen this way, the story is less about lying and more about mortality. Mortals are fragile not because they die, but because their words can
Hear
fail.
my decree.
Gods in myth are defined
Listen
not by immortality
closely.
alone, but by the unshakable power of their speech. When Zeus commands, storms obey. When Odin whispers, runes reveal themselves. But mortals, their cries may be ignored. Their warnings may lose force. Their words can become empty. The shepherd boy's tragedy is not that he lied, but that when truth finally left his lips, no one could tell the difference. And so the fable unfolds as philosophy in disguise. It is not merely a lesson for children, but a meditation on the most fragile of human bonds, trust. Without it, no prophecy can save you, no defense can stand. A society that can no longer recognize the difference between truth and falsehood is already lost long before the wolf appears. Perhaps then, the boy was never only a liar. Perhaps he was an unwitting prophet, a Cassandra in sheep's clothing condemned not by his deceit, but by humanity's inability to hold faith in words. And if so, his tale is not just a bedtime story, but a mirror warning us that when we dismiss every cry as false, we may not hear the last one until it is too late. So perhaps the shepherd boy was never only a liar at all. Perhaps his cry was the oldest trial of humanity, the moment when trust itself was weighed, and the fate of the many hung upon the voice of one. But he is not the only figure cursed with a warning unheeded. Another tale, one you think you know, hides the same shadow of
Listen
voice
to me.
raised again and again, ignored, until ruin came. Click here to uncover the forgotten prophecy buried in the legend of Cassandra. I'll see you in a future story.